I'll just do a quick intro for me and then maybe give you the sec to do the same, nothing too long. But Casey Bergseth, I'm on the sales team here at Vericast. Got about 20 years in the CPG and digital space, and a decent amount off and on with Kellogg's over the years. So looking forward to learning a little bit more. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, buddy.
Yeah, so Jordan Narducci, as mentioned, I work at Kellogg. I sit on our global digital team focused on building out our direct-to-consumer capabilities and strategy, and really just somewhat new to Kellogg. I joined a couple of years ago, came from more of a startup background, so excited to kind of dive into all things Kellogg today.
Love it. All right, well, we got some good questions for you, but I think before we get too serious, maybe we can each start with, let's pick our favorite Kellogg's brand and maybe like a reason or two behind why that's our favorite Kellogg's brand. And you probably have a better story than I do. I'll let you go first. I'll set myself up for failure and let you go first with that.
Mine is going to be a surprise hit, I think, for many. Okay. And I always get an interesting reaction, but mine is actually on the all brand side. I think all brand is like one of our most underrated products out there. It's incredibly high in fiber. I've discovered the all brand buds in particular, which are like a crunchier, smaller version. Think like instead of the longer version that you often find, and they're delicious, man. And I think fiber, which we'll talk about, I think, throughout today a little bit later. Fiber is the future, and I think anybody that kind of struggles with gut health issues, myself personally, I've dealt with some. It's making a big comeback. So I think all brand's been at it for a long time, and I've recently rediscovered it.
All right, nice.
What about you?
Well, mine's a little bit of a funny story. Mine is my favorite brand is definitely the white cheddar Cheez-Its. I feel like it's something that once I have one, I have like 6,572 of them. So there was a night, my girlfriend and I were hanging out, watching a movie, and we were like, had the late night snacks, and she goes and grabs, a box of white cheddar Cheez-Its, and then brings them back, sets them in between us, like sitting on the couch with like a little armrest. We're nibbling before we know it. Like I reach my hand in there, there's nothing left in there, and I'm like, how many of these did you eat? And then she looks back at me with a good amount of attitude and said, how many of these did you eat? And then like we both just started laughing and like basically blaming each other. So not only are they a part of a great diet, they're also great for your relationship. So that's probably it's our. I
love it. I'm sure those conversations happen on a daily basis across relationships. And
oh yeah,
Cheez-Its are one of our favorite brands for sure.
A great unifier. All right, so now that we have that established, which I'm sure everybody was tuning in to hear today, why don't we jump in really quick? I know Eurospace obviously is in the e-com umbrella. Why don't we just kind of set the stage with regards to the e-com space in general for you guys, and kind of where your world fits within the definition of e-com?
Yeah, so within global e-commerce, we kind of break it down into three main pillars. The main focus, like where we generate most of our revenue today, is what we call e-retail. So that's the pure plays like Amazon.com, the Walmart.coms, Tesco.com, all of the kind of online retail versions, and then even some of our like more emerging platforms, which is constantly evolving. Things like Instacart and DoorDash and all of these new convenience plays. All kind of fit into that pillar. Then we have B2B, which is probably a lesser known and less discussed pillar, at least in the CPG space. So this is like enabling e-commerce and a lot of AI to basically create optimizations for some of our smaller format stores. So think like convenience stores that maybe are like mom and pop, family owned, whatever. They don't always get like sales reps coming to them on a monthly basis, weekly basis, whatever. And so we've actually integrated a new platform that uses technology to say like, hey, actually in your area and based on the type of store you are, we've found that actually unlocking these kind of products can add a lot of value to you, and you can get a lot of traction. And so it makes recommendations. It makes it, it does all sorts of really interesting stuff. Like you can take shelfies, we call it, where you can actually take photos of your shelves and get points. So it's like a rewards-based platform, uses a lot of the techniques that you would use for like a standard e-commerce site, and drives kind of incremental value. We're seeing a huge lift in people with and without the platform, is driving meaningful value. So the team's doing really cool work there. And then the last pillar, which is where I think we'll focus most of the discussion today, is on direct to consumer. And and that's really just all about us getting closer to our consumers. Historically, we've always sold through our retail partners. And so with regulation and privacy becoming more and more in the news, we read about iOS updates and things like that. I think it's really important for us to start developing that relationship, and owning that experience.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I know over the past, even since the pandemic kicked in, I mean, we've seen on the Vericast side, obviously, we've seen a huge increase. And I'm sure this has been talked about for pretty much everyone out there in the CPG space and beyond. The growth of e-com, the bigger umbrella, has been nothing short of substantial. The growth across all three pillars that you kind of just mentioned, I'm sure is going to follow a similar path forward, but in uniquely different ways. And I think DTC, which is your space, is something a little bit more custom and a little bit more nimble with regards to keeping you guys have a little bit more control over the space and the branding and the targeting and everything there. So I think that could be something, as we all move into the future, that'll be kind of a cool thing to kind of keep our tabs on. So that's great to hear. So that being said, within the DTC space, which we're seeing some growth in that area too, maybe just explain a little bit about the day in the life and what that means for you and your team, and kind of how you see that moving forward at Kellogg and in the industry.
Yeah. So there's kind of, I would say, two main areas that we focus in on within direct to consumer. One is thinking about launching new brands, new products digitally first, much like a startup would in white space areas for us. So think like emerging trends, new areas that we're not playing today with our brands, identifying where those are, and then going after them with new executions. So we have a couple examples of that. And then the other area is starting to unlock and amplify some of our core brands. And I love that you brought up Cheez-It earlier, because that was actually one of our first pilots that we got off the ground for direct to consumer. Was with Cheez-It, and we've gotten some really interesting learnings there. And then we have a few more kind of in the pipeline. Future state, I think Kellogg as a company is a very decentralized organization. I sit on the global team, which is really all about bringing new capabilities, new technologies, and launching new things like channels, like the direct to consumer channel. And then scaling it up across brands. And so I think we will over time shift from a very brand driven, regionally driven approach today, which is where we are today, like what we did with Cheez-It. And we have some earlier acquisitions like RX Bar, who've been playing in the space for a long time. But I see a future state where we have all of our brands under one umbrella, or several of them unlocked where it makes sense, and selling direct. And I think then it gets really exciting because you can get some interesting learnings with cross selling across brands and all sorts of bundling and cool stuff so you can do based on occasions and gifts and things like that.
Yeah, I love it. So I could get some Pringles, I could get some Cheez-Its all wrapped in one. Then you'd know that Casey was a big fan of both, and we all kind of build on it from there. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I love the Cheez-It innovation. Obviously, you struck a chord with that example with me, and I'm sure millions of people out there. Do you have a good, cool example of an actionable, like mature brand innovation that we can kind of chat through and kind of hear one of those brought to life?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cheez-It is the freshest, so I think that's probably the one that jumps out for me, and the one that I've kind of been most actively involved in, given I'm relatively new. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Cheez-It truly was a test and learn pilot for us. I think that's one thing I've kind of discovered as the way to get these things off the ground. It can be a heavy lift, but if you position it as a test and learn pilot, I think a lot of friction is removed. And I think for us, it was about how do we be a little more nimble? You know, a lot of times innovation can take a long time at CPG companies. And so we wanted to kind of test like this mindset of, can we launch something within 6 months? Can we develop a new flavor offerings, new products? We had a really exciting merchandise component to this, which I think when you're talking about food and direct to consumer, I think having a strong merchandise component to the offering where on the brands where it makes sense, like Cheez-It or Pringles, you named a couple.
Yep.
I think merchandise is a great way to kind of increase your average order value, increase, you know, a lot of times there's great margin on apparel. There's a lot of kind of reasons for playing in that space. And so we were really just testing the waters with it. And I think what was really exciting was we went from ideation and kickoff to website going live in just about 6 months. So I think we kind of proved that we can be super nimble. And the way we did that was we launched 3 new flavors of our extra toasty lineup, and bundled them together with the original extra toasty. So it was a 4-pack. Again, that helps with your unit economics, and drives your average order value up. And I think overwhelmingly, I think what's just been pretty like amazing in working on these kind of power brands that I, you know, coming from more of a startup background, didn't have the luxury of that before, is just the community that they have. I mean, we did a post that we were going to be launching. It was just a post with someone wearing some socks with Cheez-It branding on them, really cool socks. And we got an incredible wait list just from just one post of people that wanted to be the first to know about this new Cheez-It offering. So people are clearly like chomping at the bit for these kind of activations. And then when we went live, I think what's been really impressive is just the engagement we've gotten. We've seen essentially an 80% open rate on the emails that we've been sending.
Oh, wow.
And that's not just on that initial waitlist email. We got like that kind of traction. I was like, wow, that can't be sustaining. And it's sustained, you know, and all of the emails we've sent afterwards have gotten similar open rates, and the click-through rates have just been also well above any sort of industry benchmark I've ever seen. And so I think the power of the brand and the engagement is really strong. And what we did was we coupled this new kind of bundle with a campaign that the brand has been doing over the past couple of years. Every year they do a wine and Cheez-It campaign, which is a really fun activation. You can imagine, you know, you and your girlfriend dipping into that, you know, and I think that's like where you can really start playing around with some of the activations that these brands do that are really strong and powerful, and combine it with a D2C offering that amplifies it. So that's a big strategy as we think about direct to consumer as a channel. It doesn't always need to be incremental. You know, it doesn't always need to be new, which we did have some new with these flavors, but you know, we were able to tap into a campaign in terms of the creative and the PR and the outreach that they were going to do from a demand side generating perspective, that we could take advantage of and basically just give a call to action to come purchase. And so it was basically these like champagne coupes, because surprisingly, I think this was mind blowing to me that Cheez-Its, this is the 100-year anniversary of Cheez-It. So this year, as our 3rd annual wine and Cheez-It execution, we actually did these champagne coupes. And so you toast with the toasty lineup, you know, to the 100-year with Cheez-It, which was really fun. And the coupes had this, like, it's hard to describe without showing an image, but it was basically, think a 1950 champagne flute coupe, and then underneath it was a built-in bowl where you could store your Cheez-Its and eat directly out of them. So it's just a really fun campaign. And I think, you know, for us, again, it was kind of, let's throw some stuff out there, see what works, see what resonates. And I think overwhelmingly positive. And so now we're thinking about, you know, how do we want to activate this in 2022? And I think really starting to tap more into those kind of activations that the brand already has in mind, and then combining it with like being able to bring these things to life a little faster, especially on the innovation side.
Man, I feel like you took DTC to completely another level with the wine and Cheez-It pairing. I am a huge fan of that. So first of all, if you guys have any need for focus groups or volunteers moving into 2022 and beyond, I know we have each other's information. Please please put me on that list. And then secondly, man, if you guys have Cheez-It socks, I would love to rock like 100-year like Cheez-It hoodie or something. It's getting to be a little chilly here in Minneapolis this time of the year. So if you guys have a hoodie or a winter hat, I could be a walking billboard for you guys every day of the week. So you let me know what you got there, and I'm on board, my friend.
You're setting me up because those are all currently available. So we'll have to. I'll be sharing some links and discount codes with you soon.
I can pay full price, buddy. I'm all about helping your margin out. Don't worry about it. All right, so that was an awesome example of a lot of things happening in the DTC space for you guys. I love the example, not just because it's Cheez-Its, but kind of bringing a couple of worlds together there for true consumer experience and bringing things together that can be something that's fully customized for you guys and your business, and that's creative and out of the box, and it's fun to think about. It's fun to probably in your role, which I'm kind of jealous of your job right now, like the ideas and the ideations that would come from those types of thoughts across all of the portfolio products that you guys have. I mean, there's so many fun, cool things that you guys can action on. So I can imagine you guys have some cool things in store for all of us from the rest of this year as we come into holiday time, going into 2022. And then I know you have an international scope of things too. So there's got to be a infinite amount of thoughts, ideas, and strategies moving forward. So awesome example there. I know you mentioned kind of the breakthrough world for new items and new products. That was obviously like a mature brand with a new cool like innovation. Maybe another example that you could give and kind of talk through with regards to a breakthrough product or a breakthrough brand that maybe wouldn't be as familiar for everybody out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's another brand. This was our first example of bringing digital activation to life. Is actually in the UK, and so probably most people haven't heard of it. But there's a brand we launched in the UK called Mwell, and that's really a brand in a completely new territory for us. I won't say completely, given what I just spoke about all brand, but this is in a new area for us, focused on the microbiome and really gut wellness. And I think we see the science evolving in that space every day. The connection that you're able to make between the microbiome and fiber, prebiotic fiber, and some better for you ingredients that can drive a meaningful impact on your overall wellness and health. And I think as the science evolves in that space, we want to be there and playing and be a leader in that space, like we have been with All Brand. And so we launched that about a year ago, and we've gotten some really incredible learnings so far on that. And we're now calling it like Mwell 2.0, which is really just emphasizing the model of direct to consumer as a channel. It's all about iterating and improving and learning from your consumers. And the whole reason you do it is the whole reason you launch through the direct to consumer is to do just that, right? The current model, that most CPGs do is they develop products. It can sometimes take some time because there's a lot of regulation and safety that goes into it for good reason. And then we put it on shelf, and I think a lot of times there isn't that direct connection to the consumer. And so this brand, we've gotten a ton of learnings just in the first few months of operating. And we're now using the language of Mwell 2.0 to just emphasize that like this journey is all about iterating. And based on the learnings we've gotten, we now are kind of improving the messaging, the communication, the branding is being updated a little bit, and then also the product offering. We launched with a whole robust kind of offering in different food formats, and really it was again a test and learn to learn which categories resonated most with consumers. And you get a lot of again, similar to Cheez-It, we sent consumer feedback surveys to every consumer who purchases from us with a ton of questions about like what they thought about the product, not just a rating and a review, but really dive into like consumer research on people who, I like to use the phrase, voted with their wallet, right? It wasn't just a online or qualitative or quantitative survey. It was like actually someone who went and purchased this from the online channel. So they're the best type of people to really dive into and get the best type of learnings and data. And so we've gotten a ton of learnings, and now we're thinking about like, how do we really scale this up based on those learnings? And the ultimate goal, I think, with this brand, and I think for all of the brands that we're thinking about in these white space territories, is to expand, to other channels and ultimately bring it into retail. But you got to make sure you get your messaging and all of your components and product offering right. And that's where I think, like, historically, startups, in the direct consumer space have always had a great kind of direct relationship with their consumers to understand their needs, in a really strong way. And so I think what you're seeing is, like, the Kellogg's of the world are moving more into this kind of digitally first mentality of what we call, like, transactional learning activations, which, it's doing pilots, getting things off the ground faster, iterating, getting the messaging right, and then ultimately bring it to shelf. And by doing that, like, you should, in theory, improve your success rate, because you've gone through iterations, you've gone through messaging, you've figured out what resonates from a product and brand perspective best, and then you're bringing it to retail, much like our peers do in the digitally native space. And so I think it's been really interesting to see that kind of shift of big companies moving more into direct, and then you see all of the direct companies moving into more the traditional retail space. And that's oftentimes where you hit the scale and the profitability, like the really drive both of those two areas. And so I think this kind of idea of omni is truly, like, the future. I know we've all been talking about it for 5 years, but I do think it's, like, truly now is the time that we're all kind of focusing on both channels. Really important.
Yeah, I love for both of those examples of innovation and breakthrough. It's really cool. And you mentioned the 80% open rate, and the people who, and I'm not as familiar with the MWell world, but people who are willing to give you so much of their information. It gives you guys the chance to really learn, kind of in the infancy, or in the, without the scalability of asking all these questions. You guys have, like, a good relationship one-to-one with your core users on MWell and on Cheez-It, to give you guys so much valuable information with regards to making it scalable, making it profitable, and doing it in the right way. So really cool to hear how that's working out and how you guys leverage that. And I'm sure there's all sorts of interesting examples. And I think, honestly, one of the cooler things for all of us, and we've all probably have different habits now than we did, 2 years ago or whatever, with regards to the e-com space, is when you have that big of a kind of a paradigm shift in consumer behavior, like, the demand forces all of us to react, to create, like, the future of e-com and the future of DTC and the future of these types of events. So it's cool that, you get to play and have a front row seat and participate and drive how all this stuff happens across your brands and across different countries across the world. So it's pretty cool to hear you chat through some of those examples and how that's going to kind of pave your way and Kellogg's way into the future.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think, one of the stats I'll just throw out there, when we did that survey for the Cheez-It fans, we asked them, like, would you be willing to leave your email address for us to kind of email directly to you, to ask specific questions, and maybe even hop on a call to dive into some, to get your feedback at a more granular level, or for future innovations we're thinking about.
Yeah.
87% of people said yes and left their email address. And so it's just like, again, the power of these communities. And I think similarly, MWell is much earlier in its journey, and it's a lesser known brand, and it's just getting kind of its start. But, again, like, the amount of engagement you can get from consumers, and I think just asking for help, right? Like, everybody's been a new brand, a new entrant, and I think people are much more willing to help than most people would realize. And I think that's the power of this channel, is that one-to-one.
Yeah, I love it. We all probably get so many requests and asks for, like, email spam and all these things coming in. But yeah, for certain brands and certain products that you have, like, a little bit more of interest in and have some long-term equity built up or interest in, like, I would be more receptive to, obviously Cheez-It's the example of the day, but that's a really cool way to build upon. And I would be willing to, like, have a quick convo or chat through some cool ideas or whatever. Whereas most things most things that we buy would be a commodity, or maybe you wouldn't have any form of a funny story behind it, or it's more of a commodity based. But for something like that you have an affinity for, you're willing to give a little bit more, because then you feel a little bit empowered as a consumer, kind of changing that direction of how things might move for the brand or for the distribution moving into the future. So kind of a cool way to share that experience with your top shelf consumers of whatever brand it may be.
Yeah, and I think, just building on that, I think, when you tap into this, like, exclusivity angle, that's a big this idea of like drops, right? Like that started with sneakers, and now it's kind of moving into more in the CPG space of like being one of the only people ever to have this product, right? I think people are much more willing to be like, wow, like I'm like one of the few that got to try this. Yeah, I'll give you some feedback, right? Like, and similarly, when you're a new brand and you say like, look, we're a new brand, like we truly want to improve this based on, you know, what we hear from all of you, and we're on a journey together. And I think, you know, especially people who have suffered from like gut health issues, I think people want to find like the right solution for them that works, that's easy, that's effortless, you know, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with Imwell, but still tastes good, doesn't impact on taste. And so I think people who have gone through some of those challenges, I think, you know, are much more willing, and they're proactively looking for these type of solutions. So I think, you know, I think that's what we're able to tap into in those two spaces. And there's a lot of other, you know, white space territories that we're going after that we haven't talked about, but similar, I think there's going to be these kind of communities as we bring them to life.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine with an Imwell, like a newer innovation breakthrough, international scope, and then a Cheez-It mature brand. I'm sure there's many other examples like of all the other ones. And I know you've been around in this role for roughly 2 years or so, but has there been, I can imagine, logistics, supply chain, et cetera, from a challenge perspective, like has there been some top-notch lessons learned or lessons that you can apply towards any other brands that you've kind of learned about moving into the future?
Yeah, I mean, for us, you know, let me first preface. I'm not having to go through the challenges with supply chain right now, because we are creating a completely separate operating model. So I think like I've had the luxury of not having to, you know, my direct kind of initiatives that I'm working on haven't been struggling with that as much. But I will say, even that touches you know, from an ingredients and supplier perspective. And I think the team, you know, first it was COVID, and now, you know, like coming out of it, it's with all the ports and everything that's happening. I mean, the team's doing an incredible job, but it is tough out there for the supply chain across the industry. So you know, my hat goes off to everybody who works in that space. I think for us, I think, you know, it's really about doing things differently, right? Like Kellogg is a 115-year-old company that's been doing things a certain way, you know, really efficiently. They're really good at, you know, at doing things the way that we do them, which is all about scale through retail partners, building these great brands. And when you start talking about, you know, doing things completely different, right? Like launching things outside of our typical SKU to market process, and using things like our pilot plant to bring these small batch productions to life and be a little more nimble. And then you talk about a new channel, like where you do what we call always on marketing, right? Like that's new to us, right? Like we're not used to having this kind of always on engagement strategy. It usually comes in bursts. And so I think this whole model of direct to consumer is challenging in its own right. And I think for me, like the big lesson learned, and I touched on this at the beginning, is like positioning these more as test and learn pilots, and then iterating on them has been successful for us, because it doesn't take a huge commitment then, right? You're not like setting up the whole kind of the next 3-year plan for, and it's like, no, let's test the waters, let's bring it to life like we did with Cheez-It. It resonates. So now we're talking about what's next, right? But it's like, let's just start with dipping our toes in the water. And then I would say the other thing that we're doing a lot of is building infrastructure that enables that. That's like a big thing coming out of the pandemic. Is the way we've been doing it with these test and learn pilots is great, because it allows us to get things going quickly, and we want to continue to be able to do that. But the one thing that doesn't happen is it doesn't fully integrate into all of our systems. And so what we are doing, you know, like I said at the beginning, RX Bar has been, you know, kind of an acquisition that we did for quite some time, but we're now taking some of the learnings from them and going to be able to leverage some of the technologies that they've been using and really build it into our infrastructure, so that, you know, when we do want to bring on a new brand through this channel, we can kind of like have a templatized solution where it's kind of easy to, unless it needs, you know, a very specific use case like personalization or something, we should be able to bring things to life in a really quick way, but then it will be fully integrated. Like I think particularly, we haven't touched on this at all, the first party data element, right? Like a big core reason why most CPGs are playing in the direct to consumer space is around first party data, and making sure that it's now flowing into all of our systems so that we can take advantage of it and actually use it. You know, it's not just about collecting data. It's like, how do you then go leverage the data? And for us, it's about, you know, creating lookalike campaigns based on people who have purchased from us, and then driving media efficiency through those kind of campaigns. And so for us, it's really important not just to capture the data, but then to actually start using that and set up the data governance and the privacy policies and all of that to be able to do that across brands in our portfolio.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, in our world and in your world, and I think the media and CPG space, the first party data, obviously for a lot of us is gold. And that's a way, this is a great way. And you're in a great spot for the ground level build up to get people to share that data. And then you build it out, you share it out. And then how do you activate against that? How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it relevant? How do you make it scalable? And then, yeah, with your RX bar example, I mean, it's a great acquisition. It makes a lot of sense, especially with where things are going now, maybe at a faster pace than anybody would have known back when that was more fresh and hot off the presses. That's going to be a great way for you guys to learn some lessons and some processes that have already been in place at an RX bar and bring it to life. Maybe to your point, save some money on time, get everything ready to rock and roll, because you already have something that's already been successful, and you can learn from that as you apply it to the Cheez-Its and the Imwells of the world. So cool to hear. That's awesome. It's amazing. Wrapping up here. Actually, we got a Q&A that popped in. Let me see here. Is Kellogg's activating around purpose initiatives within the direct-to-consumer pillar?
Yeah, that's something we started talking a lot about. I mean, I think what we've done, again, early days, is really tap into kind of the master brand plans that they have activated, and a lot of that is around these give back components. And so, you know, I don't think I can speak to exactly what we have in the works, but yeah, I think purpose-driven marketing is critical to this channel, and I think one of the things that I think we could do a lot more of is tapping into the campaigns that we have as an organization that we already have doing really great work, but making sure a component of that is making sure each of our new initiatives are actually laddering up to that. So I would say we're in like the early stages of D2C as a whole, as kind of like the proof of concept stages. But as we think about 2022 and beyond, that is some of the conversations we've been having around how do we tie it up to each brand's individual purpose-driven marketing initiatives, and then how does that drive up to Kellogg as a company, which is doing a lot of really cool stuff that, you know, often we don't even do a good enough job of, I think, talking about, but some really cool campaigns there.
Nice, love it, cool. I know we're getting a little bit close on time. Maybe this can be, we'll see how the timing goes here, but if you could do, and this has been a great back and forth, I feel like I'm excited about a couple of different things, selfishly and professionally. So great job with that. I'm super envious of your position and kind of hear and learn more about how things are going to evolve as we move into the future. But if we could, if there could be one thing or one lesson or one takeaway for the folks that have joined us today and been listening to kind of our back and forth, what do you think is one or two top lessons to kind of take away from our chat today?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversations I have internally at Kellogg, I like to use the phrase, you know, direct to consumers is not like a channel you just turn on, right? Like it takes time to really build the muscle to be able to play in this space, and it takes a lot of iterating. And yes, there are brands out there that get it right on its first instance and just, you know, hit this rocket ship growth. But I would say the majority of brands that launch through the direct to consumer channel, it takes time before they're, you know, being talked about as a leader. You know, I think, you know, like Nike and some of the players like in the confectionery space, I think have been at it for a long time and they get talked about a lot, you know, but I think when you go back to like their earlier days, it took them a long time. It's a journey to kind of get to that state of being considered a leader and being talked about as such a strong channel. So I always give the advice of like, you got to just start now, right? And it's progress over perfection. And that's the whole point of this channel is like, I think we in the CPG industry, we spend a lot of time getting the perfect right product ready, and I think what we need to do more of and what we can do more of through this channel is really focusing on progress over perfection and bringing things to life a little faster, and not sacrificing at all on safety or any of the really important things, but I think just really having a platform to execute, be nimble, and launch. So I would say just get started, start building your muscle, because it's going to take time most likely.
Love it. I love the progress over perfection. I think probably a lot of us out there could use that in our personal and professional lives. So that's a good parting, some good parting advice. We do have a couple of questions that rolled in here. So let me just see if we can get to one last one here really quick. Yeah, what would you say are the key areas of digital transformation on the D2C side, or more broadly for you in your role now?
Yeah, I think for us, it was like first figuring out like where's the value for a company like Kellogg. So it starts with the strategy. Like that was the first 3 to 6 months. And this coming from the startup space, a lot of times you just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. I think with a company like Kellogg, you really have to have a strong point of view on where's the value to be had, and then how are you going to go capture that value. So I think digital transformation starts with the strategy and identifying like where are the pillars you want to play, and then laddering that up to what are the key brands or initiatives or projects that can help you kind of bring that strategy to life. And so that's what we've done with some of these kind of proof of concept launches. And I think now we've gotten some momentum combined with obviously the pandemic. I think has set us up for having the conversations around like infrastructure and operating model and scaling to several different brands. So I think you just kind of have to have the strategy in place, and then do a couple kind of pilot, test and learn activations against that to get some momentum, some early wins. And then that's where you can really, I think, bring your strategy to life more holistically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. Appreciate it. Well, I think we're right about here at time. So I just want to give you one last thank you. This was an awesome discussion. I truly did enjoy it. I feel like I learned a lot, which hopefully means that all the attendees were in the same boat. It's just really cool to hear about all the innovation and all the change that you guys bring across your awesome portfolio of brands. And it sounds like there's all sorts of fun stuff that you guys are working on for 2022 and into the future. So big thanks again for all your contributions and the time today.